Hi and welcome, it's Warren Beckwith here at Iconic Cars. Now today I'm not out buying a car, but I've got the opportunity to actually test a prototype. And this is something that's right to the heart of me from growing up as a kid, because it's part of the bygone years of the 60s. So I'm today at Lasham Gliding Society, where there's a huge airfield here, and I'm going to be looking underneath and getting to grips with a real iconic car. Oh my lord. Oh wow. Here with me is Steve Nichols, and actually Steve Nichols doesn't really need a lot of introduction in the world of Formula One if you know who Steve Nichols is. But I'm going to let Steve tell you exactly who he is. Steve, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
The N1A, tell us about it.
Well, the N1A is it's John Minot's idea. He wanted to do a track day car, and I'm an ex-McLaren employee who worked on their Formula One projects for 14 or 15 years, so I'm a bit of a McLaren diehard. So John's idea was to do a car based on the original M1A, McLaren's M1A, which was a Can-Am car from the 60s. It was Bruce McLaren's first car, actually. So the N1A is a modern take on the M1A, so a retro-styled track day car. So it takes a lot of its styling cues from the look of the original McLaren M1A Can-Am car.
So would I right in me saying it's a reimagined M1A?
Yeah, that would be a quite good way of putting it. It's similar in that it has a big American V8. It's the small block Chevy engine, the aluminium Chevy small block that's been developed over the last 60 years, and we'll use one of the latest evolutions of that engine. There's the possibility of using the LS3 engine, or perhaps even the latest Generation 5 LT1 engine, which is quite a sophisticated engine, very powerful. It'll have in the neighborhood of 500 horsepower. The car is going to use a bonded aluminium chassis, which is good for lightweight. It's cost effective, and it's stiff, so there are modern elements in there. And we'll use a Porsche 991 transaxle to complete the drive chain. So quite a few modern elements that are mixed in with the retro 60s Can-Am styling.
And what about the suspension?
Well, the suspension is we've done some development with the suspension to try to make sure the handling is good. It's got double wishbone suspension, front and rear, and coilover dampers. And with the development that we've done, it'll have up-to-date modern suspension with very good handling characteristics. So you've got a car that's going to weigh in the neighborhood of 900 kilos with 500 odd horsepower, so it's got a very strong power to weight ratio. It'll be quite an exciting ride.
Well, I've just had a very brief ride. Yeah. Unfortunately, the rain's come in, which has sort of curtailed that. But just on the prototype car, feeling the acceleration, but also how well the car sat to the ground was actually it was brutal in performance. And
really, though, anything over 500 horsepower, you can be spinning the wheels all the time anyway. So.
It's too much power to weight ratio.
It's more of a marketing exercise to have those big horsepower numbers.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that like to always express their idea in how much horsepower they've got.
Yeah.
In going back from the days of where someone like my father was driving in the 60s, when I see a trophy that my dad had for taking an 1100cc sports car around Silverstone at an average speed of 100 miles an hour, you then got to comprehend that in your head.
Sure.
That if you can't take 200 brake horsepower around the corner, don't bother trying to take 500.
Yeah. It is quite interesting, some of those old cars like your father would have driven. You know, if you take, say, a friend of mine and I were restoring a Lotus 17, and it has a 1100cc Coventry Climax engine in, so you know, it would have been very much like the car.
It probably was something that was probably one of the Lotus ranges at the time, knowing what my dad was doing. And touching on the fact that even though this is a prototype and this one isn't clad in carbon fibre, which is the choice of material that most people love, carbon fibre is something that you were really innovative about, or you actually were joined together to bring him. And it's been, what we're talking about, the mid-80s here probably.
Yeah.
And carbon fibre was a very secretive product.
Well,
Tell me about that.
I first dealt with carbon fibre when I first graduated from university in 1972. I was working for Hercules on the Poseidon submarine-based missile systems. So that's when I started to deal with carbon fibre in an aerospace application. I had always been interested in motorsport from the time I started racing go-karts in 1961, and my interest in Formula One was sparked by the Lotus 25 in the Formula One car in 1962. I remember there was an article in Road and Track at the time that the cover story for one issue of Road and Track was called the Lotus, it was Lotus 25, Chapman's Tubeless Wonder, because it was this innovative monocoque chassis that he'd developed. And so that's when I decided I wanted to be a Formula One designer. And to get more experience in high-tech structures and projects, as I've said earlier, my first job out of university was at Hercules, working on these rocket motors. After that, after 4 years of that, I got a job designing dampers for race cars, for Indy cars and for off-road cars and all sorts of competition vehicles, really. And so doing that, I met John Barnard, and I did dampers for his Vels Parnelli Johns Indy cars, and for his rather sensational Chaparral IndyCar as well, the famous Pennzoil Chaparral.
Yeah.
John said to me he was working on a quite radical design. He wanted a very narrow monocoque to enhance the larger, wider side pods to generate more downforce. But skinny little monocoques weren't very stiff, and he wanted a slender monocoque for aerodynamic advantage. And so he was looking at, as he put it to me, looking at using innovative, new, stiffer materials to make the monocoque. And I said to him, "Oh, well, that'll be carbon fibre," because I'd had experience in carbon fibre for the previous 9 years. And he said, "Well, since you've guessed, yes, that's what we're trying to do, is make a carbon monocoque." But he said they hadn't been able to find anybody in England to make it. So I knew that my old colleagues at Hercules were very interested in expanding the use of carbon fibre outside of the aerospace industry. And I was quite sure that they'd be very interested to assist in a Formula One project, because that would give fantastic exposure for them in sport outside of aerospace, and give them worldwide exposure via Formula One.
Well, Formula One being the absolute pinnacle of
motorsport.
of motorsport,
and also had global reach, so to speak, with races all around the world. So I contacted some of my old colleagues at Hercules, and they were indeed interested. So I gave contact details to Ron and John, and Ron immediately organized a trip to Salt Lake City to talk to Hercules, and within a couple of weeks they'd gone out to visit Hercules and had meetings with them about their involvement. It was quite interesting because I was in the UK at the time, and while they're having these meetings, one of my ex-colleagues, one of the senior managers from Hercules, phoned me up to ask about Ron and John, and I said to him, John, he's one of the very best Formula One designers, and Ron has been running Formula 2 team, Formula 3 team, and is extremely good team manager, and he's extremely good entrepreneur, and able to attract sponsorship and that sort of thing, and so I could highly recommend both of them, and between the two they form a really good team to do a Formula One project. And so he said, well, okay, we're impressed with them too, and based on your recommendation, we're going to go ahead and do the deal.
Wow.
So they did a deal to sponsor McLaren and to provide them with carbon fiber composite materials, and in fact they did the laminations of the first monocoques, the basic components, the shell and the bulkheads and all the carbon components were originally laminated by Hercules to John Barnard's design, and those pieces were shipped to England and bonded together to form the first monocoques. Then later we did the laminating in England in our own autoclave, but Hercules still continued as a sponsor and a provider of all our composite materials, the pre-preg carbon materials, resins, fibers, all of that came from Hercules for years thereafter.
So essentially, as we're talking about the carbon fibre and the fact that it is layers and it's constructionally compounding it together, ultimately it would appear that you were the conduit in bringing in the final glue together for carbon fibre to enter into Formula One.
Well, yeah, I was instrumental in doing the deal to provide. It allowed John Barnard's rather elegant and futuristic design and use of carbon fibre to come to fruition. So I was pleased to be able to help the manufacturing process to become a reality.
I mean, you look back now and you'd think they wouldn't even dream of using any other material.
Well, yeah, you can see in all the major, whether it's the World Endurance Championship or Formula One or Indy cars or whatever, all the major frontline, highest level racing series all end up making extensive use of carbon fibre in the fundamental structures like the monocoques, but also in the suspension components, in the gearbox cases, in the bodywork, in the crash structures. It turns out carbon fiber composites are very efficient material to use for the crash structures. The one on the nose, the one on the gearbox, the side impact structures, the anti-penetration layers that they have in the cockpit area. So yeah, huge amount of so much of the car now is made from carbon fibre.
It's an incredibly versatile material, but very expensive to use.
It's expensive, but very good. Very stiff, very light, very strong, and as more and more is produced and more people use it on more and more projects in the aircraft industry and racing, it becomes less expensive, more affordable.
And going forward now that with from the prototype to the next N1A that's in build at the moment, that is going to be a carbon fibre finish.
Well, we will use some carbon fibre. The basic monocoque is a tubular and sheet aluminium bonded structure. So,
Yeah.
so it's quite a modern sort of concept. Aluminium doesn't really respond well to being welded. It uses the welding process degrades the structural integrity quite a lot. So with the use of modern adhesives, a bonded aluminium structure ends up being very good from the weight point of view, cost point of view, stiffness point of view. So it's really kind of a win-win situation. We'll use some carbon fiber in some of the structural components, but we have to worry about, you know, costs as well. It's not a multi-million-pound Formula One car, so we have to be aware of the costs. But so there will be some structural carbon components. As an option for a somewhat lighter weight car, we'll have carbon bodywork available. Standard will be fiberglass bodywork, but if someone wants, you know, a lighter version using carbon fiber bodywork, we can do that as well.
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it, to have, because I know how well carbon fibre looks,
Yeah.
especially if it, you know, it's done in the right colour. You can see the weave. You don't want to feel the weave like some people do on certain cars, but you want to be able to see the weave.
Well, it's a nice thing, I suppose, visually. The aesthetics. It is a nice looking thing, and people can have that sort of thing if they want. It's not exactly period as the styling, but then we're not trying to make a exact retro copy of the car, but it's a modern take. So there are various modern elements to it, the modern engine, the modern gearbox, those sort of things, you know. So it's a mixture of the old and the new, so to speak.
Which is good, because it's it's sort of
As
a
you
reimagined.
mentioned, a reimagined thing. Yeah.
Tell me more, so that viewers can understand, is because you played a very integral part in the MP4 stroke 4 or the Formula One, for being in the greatest era that's still for Senna, Prost.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that, because your qualities and the skills that you have will speak volumes in the N1A of what you bring to the table.
Yeah. Well, I had worked at McLaren for several years as senior designer under John Barnard. He was the chief designer and technical director. He left at the end of August of 1986, and Ron Dennis appointed me as the chief designer to take over from him and to do the next car in line, which was the MP4 that was a car that we started fairly late because John didn't leave until August, and so we didn't have a lot of time. But we wanted to make changes to the previous MP4 too. The rules had changed a little bit. There was a smaller fuel tank, 175 litres instead of 220, so we could make the car a little more compact, and we switched to a side radiator outlet, which lowered the height of the side pod, so the whole car was significantly more compact than the MP4 We were still using the TAG turbo engine made by Porsche, and so we had to accommodate that size of engine. And there were still quite a lot of similarities to the previous McLarens because we didn't have a huge amount of time and we didn't want to bite off more than we could chew. That car was quite successful. We won several races. We were quite competitive. Didn't win the World Championship, but finished well up. And I could only say that it was good enough for the following year to attract Ayrton Senna as a driver and Honda as an engine partner. So then the next year, during 1987, we were designing the MP4. Now we'd had more time to think about things, more time to to do more on the design. So there were significant changes from the 4.3 to the 4.4. The rules had changed. Also, the quantity of fuel had gone down to 150 litres, so we could make a more compact fuel tank. The Honda engine was lower and more compact, so we could make that part of the car smaller and lower. Wanted to do other things. I had talked to the drivers and asked them, you know, what is it that holds you back? What problems do you have? What keeps you from going faster? And they'd listed several things. We made the monocoques significantly stiffer. The cars were now flat-bottomed, and so we didn't need the skinny little monocoque. So we made a monocoque that had a much bigger cross-sectional area, and the stiffness of the monocoque was, I don't know, I can't remember from memory. I can't remember, but it was something like 2 or 3 times stiffer than the previous monocoque. So there were several things like that we had done to address the problems that the drivers felt that they had. The wheelbase was lengthened to increase stability in pitch. We were trying to make sure that we had a very good mechanical platform for the aerodynamics. You know, we were trying to reduce the amount of pitch and roll, and we were trying to make the aerodynamics so that they were benign. You know, so that the aerodynamics weren't very pitch sensitive. So a combination of non-pitch sensitive aerodynamics coupled with pitch control measures so that the car didn't move around too much. And all of that meant that the car was extremely stable, so that the drivers could really drive it hard, wring its neck, so to speak, and have a stable, comfortable feel. And that's the main thing that they liked about the car, was its stability. They could just really drive it hard and without fear of getting bitten, so to speak.
Well, that's good, because the object was to get those cars through the corner as fast as possible.
Yeah, sure.
So and this has been a baby for you. This N1A project. You say it was John's sort of dream as well to create a road, essentially a road stroke track car.
Well,
it brings back it evokes the era of the bygone years of the 60s, which you know people hanker for as one of the most loved eras of motorsport.
It was an interesting period, I guess. If you know, the Can-Am, McLaren had a big history in Can-Am, and in fact, as I said earlier, the M1A was Bruce's first car, and he used to love Can-Am. You know, he was doing Formula One and Can-Am at the.
Well, a lot of drivers in those days were driving in so many different, and competing in various different races. They weren't just stuck into one category.
Well, that's right. Yeah. You know, in that era, they used to drive sports cars, saloon cars, Formula One cars, Formula 2 cars.
Yeah.
They had a wide variety of things that they were driving. And McLaren in particular were very strong in Can-Am and Formula One, and I think Bruce actually liked Can-Am more than Formula One. They're real beasts, those cars. You know, they had 800 or 900 horsepower. You know, so I remember testing the I guess it was the M8, probably the M8D, testing a good one alongside Formula One car. You know, they're very close to the same lap times. The Can-Am car was in fact slightly quicker than the Formula One car, you know. And a different sort of composite, you know, bigger and heavier and more powerful than this big beast of an American V8. So totally different character, but lap times quite similar.
It's interesting because when I look and hear stories from my father about the 60s, and you'd see a gaggle of cars that were driving, you know, you'd have a Lotus 23 up against things like a 5 litre Chajiro or the, you know, you're thinking, how does that equate? But of course, if you've got that momentum going and the handling's right on the car, a small engine car can outperform a big engine beast that was all over the place. It's a bit like a Ford Galaxy.
Well, yeah. You see, I know you mentioned the Lotus 23, one of my all-time favorite cars. You know, little light rear-engine sports car with that little twin-cam Lotus engine.
A very successful car for my dad.
It was fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic car. Yeah. So, and you used to see that too. You know, you'd see saloon car racing, and you'd have a Lotus Cortina, you know, with the same little twin-cam Lotus engine, racing against, you know, Ford Falcons and Ford Galaxies with the big 7-litre V8s. You know, so quite.
But I think the N1A is so evocative of the 60s, and the thrill and the driving experience of that is, it's not.
So, you know, anybody can buy the car, and it's not going to be just experienced race car drivers that are going to be driving the car. So, you know, it would be good for people to, if they're going to buy a piece of equipment, it's always good to learn how to use it. You know, and it's a good idea, I think, whatever you're going to do. If you're going to play golf, then get some golf lessons from a golf pro, or tennis, or whatever it happens to be. And it's the same here. So we're going to provide a schooling sort of experience for the people, where they can have instruction from a professional race car driver and learn more about their car, how to use it, and how to better enjoy it.
I mean, that way they'll get the most out of it, because they'll know where they can push and where they can't push, and it will give them the feedback that a car should give them. And I think that's something that's missing from today. I think it's too easy for people to go and buy a high performance car, and they don't realise they've actually got their hands on a lethal weapon. and no, you know, you do what you just think it's just going to do everything for you. Yes, it can do to a limit, but if you don't know where you're going to put your foot down and accelerate, you're going to, you know, kill yourself or kill somebody else.
Yeah, well, sure, you know, and there are a lot of driver aids in cars these days, well, in cars and motorcycles, you know, with all the electronic aids. And the problem with that is, perhaps if you drive harder and harder, and the electronic aids help you out so much that you don't maybe realize you're getting close to the limits of the electronic controls, and so eventually, if you do kind of get in over your head and beyond the limits of the electronic aids, then you really are in trouble, you know.
Well, I've tried to express this before, because when they started bringing out all these rally cars, you know, the Subarus and the Imprezas and the Mitsubishi Lancers, etc., that people were driving these cars with so blasé that they could take a car around a corner so much faster than they ever could before. But when they got it wrong because they'd pushed a limit, they didn't have the speed of interaction to be able to correct it, and then it was too late. And it wasn't ever a small crash; it was a big one.
A big one, yeah.
And the great thing about this is a car that people will respect, but they will really appreciate the feedback, the thrill, and the evocative noise that's going to come out of it, because that's what we go to motorsport for. And you know, motorsport today, when you watch Formula One, you as much as I love Formula One, I've been fortunate to go to so many Grand Prix because of my father. One of the things, it's to me, going to a Grand Prix today is a bit like going to an AC/DC concert, but with the volume on 6 instead of the volume on 11. You know, you come out of the circuit and your ears are ringing. It's all a part of being emotionally drawn in and evolved. But this will give somebody the experience, and any good car collector who's got a passion for cars from the 60s or a passion for cars, this is a car that will really get right under his skin and will just make him grin ear to ear.
Yeah. Yeah, different. It's a different driving experience, you know. It's not going to be like, you know, driving your luxurious saloon car, and you know, it's a much more intense sort of thing, and much more involving. And like I said earlier, you know, you really do have to drive the car and concentrate and keep on top of what's going on. Yeah, it's not going to be a on cruise control sort of experience.
No. You must be really looking forward to getting this next, because this next prototype that's you know, your next model that's coming forward is so much more advanced.
Yeah, it's you know, we've done this original prototype, a bit of a mule to test out certain things and learn some things, and now this is the Mark II prototype, so to speak, which is quite different. You know, it's all the major components on this one are going to be the finalized production items, the engine, the gearbox, etc. It'll have the bonded aluminium chassis, and it'll be considerably lighter than this first prototype, 100, 200 kilos lighter, and so it'll be the definitive product and finished off to the correct production standards. Whereas the first prototype, it's been a little bit rough and ready, you know, and cut and shut and try things and all that. So now this is the definitive prototype for the proper production cars.
What's going to be really nice for somebody with this car is that they can actually really bespoke this car to how they want it to look, with the composite materials, to whether how they want to show the carbon fibre, what they want to do inside of it, but they can make this their own. You know, there'll be no other one like it.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a very low volume
Yeah.
production car, and so you know, we're able to have options and do various things that people would like to have different, you know. So in large measure, it will be sort of bespoke, you know.
How many do you think that you'll be able to build per year? Or how long does it take to make? Would it take, you know, obviously that will get quicker and quicker.
Yeah. The first one will take a while, you know, while we're learning to build it, and techniques and procedures and all that sort of thing. But John Minott, it's more his area, but I think he'd like to build up to it over a period of months. But if we get to the point where we're producing, say, one a month, and depending on how well it's received and what the market looks like, what demand there is, you maybe increase that to, instead of 12 a year, maybe 18 a year, 24 a year, but probably never in huge volumes. You know, inevitably it's sort of a niche market thing. It's not ever going to be a mass-produced vehicle.
But I think a lot of us, we never know what things are going to be like, but unless you do it, you're never going to find out. So it's something that, as long as you go into it with the love of doing it, I think things, you know, as long as you don't give up on it, I think things will always, you know, can come right. You just have to keep, if you fall down, you just got to pick up again, and you learn. And if you, look, someone say to me, "Oh, but you've made a mistake," but no one's ever made a mistake by doing something.
Well, yeah.
Because if you do nothing, you've made nothing. You couldn't even make a mistake if you did nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of the old cliche, isn't it? You know, if you're not making any mistakes, then
you're not doing anything.
You're not doing anything. Yeah. So.
And there's no such thing as failure as long as you get back up.
Yeah, we try to minimise the mistakes, of course, and learn from your mistakes. And carry on from there.
Well, all you do is just re-review it and take just think, okay, what could we have done differently to have got this better. And I think
Yeah.
you've done with what you've achieved. And I know we've had the break with the COVID, but it's had time to maybe think about other things that are getting forward, and getting this one now close to being ready. It's going to be could be quite a spectacular car.
Well, yeah, I hope so. And so far, it's been, even though this first prototype is, a bit of a mule and a little rough around the edges, and I'm always a little bit disappointed to have to make excuses for it because it isn't finished off to the sort of standard that you do for the production cars. But so yeah, it'll be really nice to have the finished product where you don't have to make any excuses.
Yeah, but you can't be too harsh on yourself about that, because if you look at, you're not a large manufacturer who has a team of people building a car out of clay and so on and so forth. You've really had to go all in to be building a full-on prototype.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be making excuses about it, because I think the car looks absolutely fantastic. It's the reminiscence that it brings about it.
Yeah.
It's just glorious.
Well, people do seem to like it, so it's got something going for it.
And the sound of an
aesthetic
engine,
side.
this. I know everybody's going on about electrification, but the sound of an engine is at the heart of it.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of the soul of the car in a way.
Absolutely.
People. There's some electric cars that have amazing performance, but quite often you hear the comment that they're a little bit soulless,
Yeah.
So. And it does make quite a nice sound, Well, different people like different sounding engines. Some people like the really high-pitched V12 engines, for example, but the typical throaty V8 sound is a favourite for a lot of people.
I think it's a big favourite. I think it's an engine that people have associated with for many years. That they are all different sounding, but I think the V8 is one of the most.
It is. Nice
V10
sound.
doesn't, sort of the V6s, and then you've got V12s. They all have, but there's something very hearty about a V8.
Yeah, definitely sound. It sort of sounds, it's a big, strong sound.
Yeah, it's just very. It just beats. That's just something very. As I say, my word is hearty for it. But
yeah, I know. I mean, I know from my experience in Formula One, it's an amazing sound. A few years ago when we had V12 Ferraris revving to 18 or 19,000 RPM, it's incredible.
Those days, being at, I've been in the pits there and been at Silverstone when you sitting at 19,000 RPM. I think they were screaming at, especially on qualifying day.
Yeah. But then you had
qualifying in. I mean, just think about this for a minute. Qualifying, we used, back in those days of like Williams with qualifying engines.
Yeah,
that's just for Saturday.
Sure. Yeah. But you mentioned Williams. You remember those Renault V10s? Yeah, they were brutal sounding things. I remember standing on the pit wall and they'd go by and it would just shake your chest. They really sounded strong.
But you walked out knowing you'd been to an event.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive.
You go to Grand Prix now, and you actually, it's been great. It's been, but you still walk out of there. You don't walk out of there having this vibration of sound through you, and that is something that goes through to the core, and that's why for me, growing up as a kid, I was I think immersed into motor racing and motorsport and the sound of engines from before I was even born, because it was being funneled through.
You say before you were born. You know how some women, when they're pregnant, they'll play soothing music and things.
Yeah, I didn't get soothing music.
You were getting engine sounds, I suppose, from your dad.
I was getting my mum sitting on the pit wall there, hearing engines exactly roar by, and whether she was, that's what I grew up. So yes, for me. Well, Steve, it's been an absolutely fabulous afternoon to spend time with you, and even more intriguing, the understanding of how carbon fibre entered into Formula One, and that essentially you were the conduit in that happening. and probably saved Formula One a decade of going down aluminium and fiberglass. It's also been very interesting to understand how bringing forward what we love of the 60s into today's modern day capturing of a car that I find very evocative, very emotional. The curvature of that car and the sculptures that are there with the scallops, the way that that's worked into with the radiators into the air screws, it's a fantastic piece of equipment. I've been given the experience in the passenger seat by one of your test drivers there, and oh my God, that's brutal performance. And it's a real shame that it's absolutely chucked it down with rain, so I won't be able to get my hands behind the steering wheel of the car. But to be honest with you, with that much power in the rain,
you have to be a little careful.
And I wouldn't be doing it any justice for us to have got the best out of it. And in fact, I'd have probably been going around in donuts rather than things. So I think it's better to save that for a sunnier day. But it'll also be better to see the second edition, because that's going to be more of the final edition with the second edition, and I think that'll be with the LT1 engine. So it'll be very interesting. I think we can save that for a much better day. But it's been so inspiring to listen to you, and how much that if it wasn't for people like you with this sort of creativity and burning for knowledge to be able to make things go better, whether it's to work out the yi and the yaw and the stance and the way of, even if you adjust the suspension strut by 5 mil, how much difference that can make to a car. And it's fascinating. I could sit here and we could talk about cars for hours. And as I say, for me, growing up through the bygone era of motorsport and having a father who was a professional racing driver, it just really gets close to me. So I really appreciate having the time, and I really appreciate getting up close and personal with the car. Just a shame that after a nice few days of weather, the weather's just
turned out like this.
Well,
can't be helped.
So let's look forward to round 2 when we have the Nichols N2A. It will be the N1A stroke 2 because we like a stroke in the models from the MP4 stroke 4. So this will be the M1A stroke 2, and it'll be great to get behind the wheel of that car and to really see and feel what it's like from a hands-on point of view. Your test driver did a great job on me. Wish I'd had a helmet on at the time, but
you sort of needed it. This kind of car. But
the noise and the feel was, at the same time, it still felt very solid and sure-footed. So if that's how that feels now, the next one's going to be epic.
I think it will be.
But it's a car that will make somebody smile every time they walk in the garage. And it'll be a constant talking piece because maybe their friends don't have one. So it's a very bespoke, very special car. Steve, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And look forward to round 2. Good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. In the LT1 engine in 850 kilos. I can only put it down to being that would be astonishing acceleration. One word, brutal. Oh. Who needs electric when you've got a noise like that?